Have you ever found yourself holding back a thought, a question that challenges the accepted view? That moment when your mind sees a different angle, but your voice remains silent. Think about the last time you bit your tongue rather than ask the uncomfortable question everyone was avoiding. What held you back? You're not alone in this experience. Throughout human history, the act of questioning has been both our greatest strength and our most dangerous ability. The human capacity for critical thinking has built civilizations and toppled empires. Yet across time and cultures, critical thinkers have faced resistance, ridicule, and sometimes much worse. Why? Imagine you're at a dinner party. Someone makes a confident assertion that contains an obvious flaw. You could point it out, but you hesitate. That hesitation, that moment of calculation, reveals something profound about how we navigate the social consequences of thinking deeply. When someone asks why, they aren't merely seeking information, they're challenging the foundations upon which we've built our understanding of reality. And that can be profoundly unsettling for those around them. Consider the difference in how we respond to various forms of exceptionalism. When we meet someone physically stronger, we might admire their dedication. When we encounter someone wealthier, we might respect their achievement. But these reactions rarely feel like personal attacks on our worth. Have you noticed, however, your own internal response when someone questions an idea you've accepted without much examination? That slight tension, that defensive impulse rising. This reaction isn't just in your imagination. The critical thinker doesn't just present an alternative view. They implicitly suggest that we haven't fully examined our own beliefs. Psychologists call this the cognitive mirror, the way a questioning mind reflects back our unexamined assumptions. And few things make humans more uncomfortable than confronting the possibility that our mental foundations rest on shaky ground. Take a moment to recall a time when you presented a challenging question and watched as people grew visibly uncomfortable. Did you press on or retreat into safer conversational territory? This discomfort isn't new. Socrates understood it well when he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." By encouraging Athenians to question their assumptions, he wasn't merely offering a philosophical method, he was challenging their sense of identity. Our beliefs aren't just positions we hold, they're integral parts of how we understand ourselves. When those beliefs are questioned, it can feel like our very identity is under attack. But why does questioning provoke stronger reactions than other forms of challenge? To understand this, we need to examine how humans process different types of social comparison. Physical differences are external and objective. We can see that someone is taller or stronger without it threatening our self-concept. Material differences exist outside ourselves. While we might envy another's wealth, it doesn't necessarily challenge our understanding of how the world works. Intellectual challenges operate differently. Our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding of reality aren't just possessions we have. They're the lens through which we experience everything. When critical thinkers question this lens, they're not just offering a different view. They're suggesting that the way we see everything might be distorted. But if our brains are wired to resist questioning, how do critical thinkers develop at all? What drives some minds to push past this resistance? And what about you? Do you find yourself driven to understand, even when that understanding might be uncomfortable? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest philosophers, offers a profound explanation. He believed that intelligence itself is not a gift, but a burden, a kind of curse that isolates those who possess it. Unlike other philosophers who celebrated intelligence as the path to success and happiness, Schopenhauer argued that the smarter someone is, the more they will struggle to connect with society. Think about this from your own experience. Have you ever found yourself unable to enjoy a simple pleasure because your mind kept analyzing it? Or perhaps you've noticed how difficult it can be to engage in small talk when your thoughts are occupied with deeper questions. Why does this happen? Schopenhauer's answer lies in his concept of the will, the blind, irrational force that drives human behavior. According to Schopenhauer, most people live their lives controlled by what he called the will to live, meaning they prioritize pleasure, comfort, and survival above all else. They avoid difficult truths that might disrupt their contentment. However, highly intelligent people operate differently. Instead of blindly following instincts, they develop what Schopenhauer termed the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, even when that understanding brings discomfort. Where ordinary people seek pleasure and avoid painful truths, deep thinkers seek truth, even when it leads to pain and isolation. Deep thinking is like swimming upstream, while everyone else floats with the current. It requires more energy, creates more resistance, but takes you to places others never see. Does this metaphor resonate with your own experience? This creates what Schopenhauer saw as a fundamental disconnect. While most find meaning in relationships, entertainment, and routine pleasures, critical thinkers often feel disillusioned with these diversions. Where most prefer surface-level conversations, those driven by the will to truth crave meaningful discourse that few seem willing to engage in. Interestingly, modern neuroscience confirms this perspective. When people encounter ideas that challenge their core beliefs, their brains show activation patterns similar to physical threat responses. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, treats intellectual challenges as potential dangers. In evolutionary terms, this makes sense. For most of human history, group cohesion was essential for survival. Challenging group beliefs could lead to exclusion, which once meant death. Our brains still carry this ancient programming, treating ideological threats as survival threats. This explains the paradox many critical thinkers experience. The more deeply they question, the more socially isolated they often become. Not because they lack social skills, but because their questioning disrupts the comfortable consensus most social groups prefer to maintain. A fascinating study from Cambridge University demonstrated how this rejection varies with context. When people interact with critical thinkers one-on-one, their defensive responses are minimal. But in group settings, rejection of the questioner intensifies dramatically. Why? Because in groups, social status and harmony take precedence over truth-seeking. People aren't just responding to the questions, they're reacting to how those questions might affect their standing within the group. Several psychological patterns further explain why questioning minds often face resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Those with limited understanding often overestimate their knowledge, making them particularly resistant to questions that reveal their limitations. Status quo bias. Our brains prefer familiar ideas over novel ones, even when the familiar ideas are demonstrably flawed. The backfire effect. When confronted with evidence that contradicts our beliefs, we often become more entrenched in those beliefs, not less. In the digital age, social media has amplified this rejection of intelligence. Think about your own social media experience. Have you noticed how algorithms prioritize engagement over depth? How controversial, emotionally charged content spreads faster than thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments. Take a look at the most viral content in your feed. Isn't it often simple, catchy, and sometimes misleading sound bites that outperform nuanced discussions? The more intellectual someone is, the harder it is for them to compress deep ideas into bite-sized, viral-friendly content. As a result, society increasingly favors entertainment over enlightenment. That moment when your carefully reasoned post gets ignored while a simplistic meme on the same topic goes viral. We've all experienced this frustration in our increasingly digital discourse. So what does this mean for those who feel compelled to question? Is the critical thinker, are you, doomed to intellectual isolation? That feeling of being alone in a crowded room, of having thoughts you can't easily share. How do you navigate this challenge in your own life? Schopenhauer did not merely diagnose the problem, he offered solutions for how deep thinkers might navigate a world that resists them. He believed that while intelligence often leads to loneliness, there are ways to transform this isolation into something valuable. First, Schopenhauer advised embracing solitude not as a punishment, but as a privilege. He saw alone time as a rare opportunity for intellectual and creative pursuits, away from the distractions of social conformity. Rather than constantly seeking validation from a society that misunderstands them, deep thinkers should value their capacity for independent thought. Think about your most creative or insightful moments. Didn't many of them come during periods of solitude? What if these moments of isolation are actually opportunities for your mind to explore without the constraints of social pressure? Second, instead of trying to fit into mainstream society, Schopenhauer suggested seeking out like-minded individuals, whether through books, philosophy, or intellectual circles. He understood that while deep thinkers might never find widespread acceptance, they could find profound connection with the few who share their will to truth. Who are your intellectual companions? Perhaps they're friends you can engage with in deep conversation, or maybe they're authors whose books make you feel understood. Remember that quality of connection often matters more than quantity. Third, Schopenhauer cautioned against blindly sharing deep insights with those unprepared to receive them. He advocated for strategic engagement, observing society, learning its patterns, and choosing when and how to express challenging ideas. This wasn't about dishonesty, but about wisdom in communication. For Schopenhauer, intelligence was a double-edged sword, a source of both profound insight and inevitable pain. While it allows one to see reality more clearly, it also distances the thinker from those who prefer comfortable illusions. In his view, deep thinkers aren't rejected because they're wrong. They're rejected because they're right too soon. The philosopher Bertrand Russell offered a complementary perspective. He suggested that the true critical thinker must develop a certain kind of courage. Not just the courage to challenge others, but the courage to live with uncertainty. The whole problem with the world, he wrote, is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, but wiser people so full of doubts. This willingness to doubt, to question even one's own certainties, is what distinguishes genuine critical thinking from mere contrarianism. The critic who simply rejects mainstream ideas without subjecting their own alternatives to the same rigorous examination isn't exercising critical thinking, but engaging in a different form of dogmatism. The neurologist Robert Burton explored this distinction in his work on certainty. He discovered that the feeling of knowing something is true, that sense of certainty we experience, is produced by specific neural mechanisms unrelated to the actual accuracy of our beliefs. Critical thinkers learn to recognize this feeling of certainty as just another mental state to be examined, not a reliable indicator of truth. But if questioning doesn't guarantee certainty, what does it offer instead? Why persist in asking uncomfortable questions if they lead not to definitive answers, but to more questions? The existentialist philosopher Albert Camus addressed this directly. In his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, he compared human existence to the Greek figure condemned to eternally push a boulder uphill. For Camus, the search for meaning in an apparently meaningless universe was similar, a task without end. Yet he concluded, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. So it is with critical thinking. The value lies not necessarily in arriving at final answers, but in the questioning itself, in the refusal to accept unexamined assumptions, in the commitment to understanding more deeply. Historical examples illustrate this principle. Copernicus questioned the Earth-centered model of the universe not because he had definitive proof of an alternative, but because the existing model couldn't adequately explain certain astronomical observations. His questioning eventually led to a revolution in how humans understand our place in the cosmos. Imagine being Copernicus for a moment. You notice something that doesn't quite make sense in the accepted model of the universe. Would you have the courage to question a belief that was not only scientific consensus, but religious doctrine? Marie Curie questioned prevailing assumptions about the nature of elements, persisting despite institutional barriers that sought to exclude women from scientific inquiry. Her questioning led to the discovery of radioactivity and opened new frontiers in physics and medicine. Alan Turing questioned whether machines could think, laying foundations for artificial intelligence long before the technology existed to build the computers he envisioned. In each case, the contribution wasn't merely the answer found, but the quality of the questions asked. Each of these thinkers faced resistance from religious authorities, academic institutions, or simply the inertia of established thinking. Yet each persisted in questioning. This persistence requires what the philosopher Simone Weil called attention, a particular quality of thought that refuses both blind acceptance and cynical dismissal. True questioning isn't about rejecting everything. It's about examining each idea on its merits, regardless of its source or popularity. So what can you do if you find yourself drawn to questioning in a world that often resists it? First, recognize that discomfort with questioning is normal, both in others and in yourself. Our brains evolved in environments where group consensus was often more important for survival than abstract truth. When you question deeply, you're swimming against powerful currents in human psychology. Second, find your intellectual community. Throughout history, critical thinkers have sought each other out. From the ancient schools of philosophy to Renaissance correspondence networks to modern online forums. You don't need universal approval. You need connections with others who value questioning as you do. Third, practice intellectual empathy. Understand that when people resist your questions, they're often protecting not just ideas, but identities. Approach questioning not as a battle to be won, but as a shared exploration. Fourth, question your own certainties with the same rigor you apply to others. True critical thinking begins with self-examination. As Nietzsche cautioned, be careful when fighting monsters that you yourself do not become a monster. Schopenhauer would add that intelligence without self-awareness becomes its own form of blindness. Schopenhauer once wrote that a high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial. His reasoning was simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more aware you become of the world's flaws, the harder it is to find conventional happiness in it. But perhaps this is not a curse, but a different kind of blessing. Perhaps the isolation that comes from deep thinking is not a punishment, but the necessary space in which genuine wisdom can develop. I want you to take a moment now to reflect on your own journey of questioning. Has it sometimes left you feeling separate from others? And yet, hasn't it also led you to insights and understandings that you wouldn't trade for mere social comfort? This paradox, that what isolates us may also be what elevates us, lies at the heart of the philosophical life. Think about the questions you've been afraid to ask, in your workplace, among friends, or even within yourself. What might happen if you found the courage to voice those questions, not with arrogance, but with genuine curiosity and the humility to learn? If this exploration of critical thinking resonated with you, share your experiences in the comments. When has questioning led you to important insights? When has it created challenges in your relationships? Have you, like Schopenhauer suggested, found value in the moments of intellectual solitude? And if you want to explore more philosophical examinations of how we think and why it matters, from Schopenhauer's pessimism to more optimistic perspectives, subscribe to this channel. The journey of questioning has only just begun.